Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's literally reshaping how we work. We're unpacking an absolutely fascinating study published in Frontiers in Communication, and it's all about a major paradigm shift in how knowledge gets shared in the workplace. Now, usually we think of learning at work as this one-way street, right? It flows from the top down. But this research reveals why some of the most innovative companies in the world are completely flipping that script to survive in the modern era. We've got some incredible data to cover today, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's kick things off with a question I am almost positive we can all relate to. Have you ever just completely misunderstood a coworker from a totally different generation? Maybe a joke totally flatlined, or an email came across as way too blunt, or a piece of feedback was just entirely misinterpreted? Well, it's not just you. This kind of daily friction is happening in literally every modern office around the globe right now.
And to give you an idea of just how real this communicative dissonance is, check out this amazing finding from the source. There was this massive study, surveyed over 9,400 people across 11 countries by Slack and Duolingo, and they found that something as incredibly simple as an emoji can cause massive workplace confusion. Take the loudly crying face emoji versus the tears of joy emoji. Younger employees, like Gen Z, they often use the loudly crying face to mean they're laughing so hard they're crying. But older generations, they tend to interpret it quite literally as profound sadness or distress. It's kind of funny, sure, but it is a perfect representation of a much deeper gap in our cultural and digital fluency.
So, how do we bridge this gap? Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The multi-generational workplace. 2. Flipping the mentoring script. 3. The real organizational benefits. 4. Trust, transparency, and willingness. And 5. A roadmap for success.
All right, part 1, the multi-generational workplace.
To really understand this shift, we have to look at the big picture. For the very first time in organizational history, thanks to things like increased life expectancy and delayed retirement, we actually have up to 5 distinct generations sharing the exact same workspace. We're talking the silent generation, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z all collaborating. And while that brings a fantastic wealth of diverse perspectives, it also introduces some pretty massive variations in communication styles, expectations of hierarchy, and work ethics.
Now, all this generational crowding brings up a pretty serious issue. Ageism. The source defines ageism as any attitude or structure that subordinates a person based on age. But here's the real surprise. Historically, we know biases in the workplace leaned heavily against young, inexperienced workers. But a growing global trend shows that ageism is increasingly targeting older employees today. They're often unfairly stereotyped as being resistant to innovation or lacking tech skills, and that leaves a lot of senior executives feeling marginalized as they face this rapidly widening digital divide.
Moving right along to part 2, flipping the mentoring script. So, how are companies actually fixing this? By taking the traditional idea of mentoring and completely inverting it. For centuries, we've relied on traditional mentoring. The source actually points out this dates back 3,500 years, to Homer's Odyssey, where the character Mentor guided Odysseus' young son Telemachus. It has literally always been top-down. The older expert imparts wisdom to the younger novice. But reverse mentoring completely flips the script. It's this flat reciprocal relationship where younger employees are actually guiding senior leaders. The juniors share their digital fluency and fresh cultural perspectives, while the seniors share their strategic institutional knowledge. It's a true two-way street that rebalances authority based on social exchange theory.
Which brings us to section 3, the real organizational benefits.
Why are major global companies jumping all over this paradigm shift? Well, the crucial takeaway here is that this is absolutely not just about teaching a CEO how to use TikTok. It's a structural intervention. Reverse mentoring fosters deep inclusivity and psychological safety. It dramatically increases retention because younger employees, especially millennials and Gen Z, feel way more valued when they're actually given a seat at the table. It accelerates tech adaptation for older executives, bridges that painful digital divide we talked about, and ultimately promotes a culture of cross-generational innovation. It just makes the whole organization way more agile. And you can see how some absolute global heavyweights are actively deploying these programs to hit very specific strategic goals. Just consider some of these examples. Jack Welch over at General Electric pioneered this way back in 1999 to drive digital transformation. He paired 500 top executives with younger mentors literally just to learn the internet. Cisco Systems uses it for diversity and inclusivity. Over in Turkey, Akbank launched its Switch program to help executives understand next-generation banking. And Shell runs its Xmile program today specifically to upskill leaders in AI and social media. The bottom line? It works.
And it scales. Let's jump to part 4, trust, transparency, and willingness. We really need to look at the underlying human elements required to make these programs actually function, rather than just becoming some performative HR gimmick. Interviewed senior executives across a bunch of international companies consistently pointed to 3 foundational pillars. First, you have trust, which allows for real vulnerability across those hierarchical lines. Then you have transparency, which helps minimize power asymmetries. But the source explicitly calls out mutual willingness as the uniquely critical enabler. Without a genuine, authentic willingness from both the senior leader and the junior employee to drop their egos and engage in real dialogue, the whole shebang will fail.
And that ties directly into the culture of the organization itself. Actually, there's this great quote from an HR manager at an international bank who was interviewed for the study. They said, "The first step is to thoroughly examine the existing culture of the organization. It can directly influence the quality and effectiveness of the reverse mentoring relationship." Basically, if your company has a super rigid hierarchy and a high power distance, meaning people just blindly accept unequal power, reverse mentoring is going to crash and burn unless you actively prime the culture for openness first.
Finally, Section 5, a roadmap for success.
So how do we practically put this into action? The researchers distilled all their findings into a clear 4-step framework. Step 1, cultural diagnostics. You absolutely have to assess your organization's readiness and how rigid the hierarchy is. Step 2, create an action plan. This means defining the scope, really carefully matching mentors and mentees based on complementary skills, and setting a consistent meeting cadence, usually every 4 to 6 weeks. Step 3 is actively cultivating those relational enablers we just talked about, trust, transparency, and willingness. And step 4 is measurement. You have to track the progress and evaluate the relationship, because careful matching and continuous measurement, that's exactly what separates a successful cultural shift from just another failed HR experiment.
Which brings us to the end of our roadmap, and I want to leave you with something to really chew on. Next time you're at work, look around. Try dropping your assumptions about hierarchy, about job titles, and especially about age. Ask yourself, who in your organization, maybe someone much younger or in a totally different department, could you learn from today? Because reverse mentoring proves that when we open ourselves up to reciprocal learning, the entire organization thrives. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some amazing new conversations in your own workplace.